Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to. Wow, lots to talk about. I gotta look at the crazy GOP cult that, look, first, Rudy Giuliani evidently got his research from Facebook, or was it Instagram? No, it was Facebook. No, wait, maybe it was Twitter. No, maybe it was Facebook. Oh, it was some social media platform, because that's exactly the place that you want the president's personal attorney to get his information. You want Bubba and Lugnut having direct access to the Oval Office. I'm literally, it's just one of those things you go, how crazy can it get? Now look, I understand Rudy's all upset. He got banned from Fox. He's getting sued. He's going broke. Trump's not giving him any help, no cover. There's no funding stream. There's no think tank. There's no shill group out there sending out emails saying, poor Rudy, give him a hand. Nothing. He's on his own. No, on his own. And you really kind of have to wonder, at what point does he realize that he's been played the fool? This was America's mayor. And here he is, part of the holy moly, you got screwed trinity. More like the dim light bulb trio, but still. You got him, you got that Sidney Powell, you got the My Pillow guy, who, I got to tell you, I think none of them were read in that this whole thing with the voter fraud, all this stuff was all just a lie. I don't think they got the memo, and I think on purpose. I think everyone else knew what the game really was. I think everybody else knew what the gig was. It was about a coup. It was about setting aside the election that, at every turn they found was well run. Look, I want to find problems. They weren't there. And what did Rudy take into court? Nothing. So you got Rudy, you got the My Pillow guy who's going to get broke. And you got this Sidney Powell, who evidently is already broke, being sued by Dominion Voting Systems for like $1.3 billion each. I mean, Rudy's going to have to get his tin cup and hit the street corner pretty soon. Sidney Powell, on the other side, she has countersued Dominion Voting Systems because she claims that, how did it go? It was really great. That they are suing her and the other two of the nitwit trio. They're suing them to divert attention. This is all a ploy. It's to divert attention from the failings of their voting equipment, trying to change the narrative, and because look, these three, the three moroniteers, they have, according to her, exposed serious flaws. But here's the thing, they brought nothing into court. This is the part that gets me. When you got Rudy going, must have been Facebook, or was it Instagram? No, maybe it was Twitter. Of where you get your stuff, you kind of go, I don't know. Maybe if you're a respected attorney, you should probably not. Anyway, she's suing Dominion for $10 million. And I'm going, really? Just $10 million? They're hitting you for $1.3 billion. And you're going to go, I want $10 million. Just plain lunacy. And here's the thing, and this is what gets me. It's all fun when you're talking about these three characters, because really they're just, they're funny. I mean, there's a level of Keystone Coppery, if you will. The bumbling idiots tripping over each other. Just there's a level of just, ridiculous stupidity. And the thing is if it were just these handful, just these couple of kooks, It would be fun. It would be funny. It would be, it would be like, remember David Letterman's Stupid Human Tricks? It would be like not such a great show of stupid human tricks, but at least you could justify they're just stupid humans playing stupid games, winning stupid prizes. But this is turning into not just Rudy Giuliani, who was America's mayor, was the head of the Republican Party for a while in New York and was looked up to. But it's the entire Republican Party that has lost their ever-loving freaking minds. And it all comes back to this Trump cult. It all comes back to this fear of this rabid base that the Republicans have. Understand, they've been building this for 40 years. They've been building to this point of white rage and building to this point of angering a working class that they've been screwing with bad policies for decades. They've been building this. I mean, I go back to Pat Buchanan back in '92 when I and a lot of other people joked that his speeches were better in the original German because he was way out on the fringe. And we were saying back then, look, this is who they're courting: the white supremacists, the maniac crowd, the lunatic fringe, the militia types. This is who they want. These are their peeps. And now you've got the entire Republican Party basically by the short hairs of these extremists. And whether you have a political system right now who are just afraid of the base, because I hear people say this all the time. Well, when Republican politicians talk in the cloakroom, they say a lot of different things. They're just afraid of being primaried by someone even more extreme, which is not untrue. But I got to tell you, by being silent, by saying nothing, you're just as bad. Now you get this, look what they did to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, and look what they did to the Gonzalez guy out in Ohio, where he just said, I've had enough of this. I'm out of here. It takes some courage to stand up in the face of a coup attempt. Now, the coup party in full cult mode today, and I happen to spend a little time in front of the TV that I normally don't, but I watched the House hearing with the three generals who, Austin, Milley, and the other guy, McKenzie, I think his name is, if I can remember his name right. And I watched in this moment and I think Liz Cheney put it best when she said, she apologized for the despicable questioning that came from her party, because all they were concerned about was attacking Joe Biden. They like a dog with a bone. No real critical thinking, no real thought process. And here's the thing, and this is where I know we as a society are screwed. You get when the political hacks are going at each other. But we're really not a serious people. You really cannot look at what happened in Afghanistan and go, all Joe Biden's fault, and run away. I mean, we cannot look at any problem that faces this country anymore in any critical thinking way, in any rational, lucid, thoughtful way. And, the thing is, we're kind of living in this bizarre world of, you ever see the movie Idiocracy? We're living that, only less funny. And it wasn't all that funny. You go down the list of the problems that we have, and we can't solve anything. The thing that we can be is pitted against each other. And I say this all the time. The wealth class of this country is thrilled that we're marginally educated but hyper self-confident in our positionings, and we buy into the most bizarre conspiracies that are floating around out there. So I happened to catch the hearing, like I said, and All of these House members, they've got their pre-planned statements that they read poorly because a staffer wrote it for them. And they're just looking for their moment to get, I can get on cable news. Maybe Fox News will call. Oh, boy. If I could just deliver the line. If I could just point the finger. General Milley, you should resign. Maybe Fox will call. Who knows? And that's what it really was. It wasn't about, hey, what did happen there? What was wrong? What lessons should we learn? For me, the lesson was don't get involved in a 20-year war. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two is militaries don't nation build. They blow things up and kill people. My friend Rich Ojeda comes on all the time and says, look, we never lost a battle, but somehow they claim we lost the war. That has everything to do with political leaders grandstanding. We should have been out of there years ago. Bin Laden dead, time to come home. But even in this moment, and it was weird to me because the Democrats were actually trying to find some solutions. And I'm not giving them a pass because some of them were trying to just defend Joe Biden as well. Because look, there were some mistakes made. Clearly, you make a choice, you got to go with it. The generals said we should leave troops there. Biden said no. Did he forget? Did he misspeak? Did he just not want to say? I don't know. But at the end of the day, the decision was made. He's taken responsibility for it. But the Republicans, like a dog with a chew toy, they feel the need to just keep chewing without any critical thought into this, without thinking about what happened during the George W. Bush years. We're going to go back and talk about that? Of course not, because that's their party. We're going to talk about the Obama years? They would be thrilled at that. But that doesn't help their immediate need to attack Joe Biden. They're certainly not going to talk about the last guy who created all of this. And he was never getting people out of there. This was a slapdash, let's throw something together so I can look like I'm bringing people home. I'll tell you, I cannot imagine what an evacuation would have looked like under the former guy. And I'll tell you, I'm glad he lost and Joe Biden was the president because we got out of there in an incredible way. The amount of people that got out in the short period of time that it happened was nothing short of remarkable. And yes, sadly, some people died, but not nearly as many as I would have expected. And look, I'm not a military person, but if you're running out the door while someone's trying to kill you, it's pretty remarkable. Now, we're in this spot where now that the divide comes, should we have left 2,500 troops? I'm of the mindset, no. And as the general said, had we left 2,500 troops, that number was dependent on the Afghan government not failing and the Afghan army actually standing up. Had they collapsed like they did, that number would have been double, would have been 5,000. And I would argue probably even more, because then you would have, ISIS-K, Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban all having, a common target. Because we would have broken our word. And this is where I agree with Biden. The choice was not whether we stay or not stay. The choice was whether we get out, bring everybody home, or we escalate. That's the choice. And whether we're there another 20 years. And I agree with his thinking. Get out. Because I don't think in this country we're ready for another 20 years. But yet I listen to those Republicans in the House today who, again, they had their well-rehearsed sound bites. They had their tweet talk ready. They were framing their social media. They were getting it all lined up because, we're going to get on Fox tonight. Oh, boy. But none of them even began to ask questions on what did we learn? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? And the number of declarative statements that they can't prove, and I understand, and this is where understand what happens in these hearings. You can lie as a congressman. You can make things up. You can say anything and not be held accountable. Now, if you're on the other side of the desk, under oath, you have to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help you everything. Or they will come down on you with hellfire and thunderbolts. So you hear all these congressmen and congresswomen going, well, we know Al-Qaeda's crossing the border, the southern border, and they're going to attack us any day now. I just wish they would take some of the energy, some of the fervor, some of the idiocy, tone that down a little bit, and think about how do we move the country forward. But the sad reality is we're not a country that wants to get things done, evidently. We're not a serious country. Hell, we can't even get people to stop throwing temper tantrums over wearing a mask in public. We've got a bunch of children running around. And they start with the people who we are calling our leaders. This is the part that's most frustrating to me. Because these are our representatives. These are the people that we've said, yep, that's the guy I want, the woman I want, that's the person I want to step up and speak up for me. And what I saw today was just disgraceful. And the thing is this is just another day. It was, hey, just Wednesday. This is what happens in Congress every day. And people wonder why people are turned away from politics. When this is where they spend the energy, instead of going, how do we make people's lives better? How do we get that infrastructure bill moving forward? How do we make sure that Granny gets some new chompers and some new glasses? How do we make sure that people's lives get better? I didn't hear any of that today. What I heard was, I'm going to score my cheap point. I'm going to get my viral tweet. I'm going to be able to put something on Instagram that'll make the staffers happy. But really nothing about how we move the country forward. And that's sad because there was an opportunity to have a conversation about what went wrong in Afghanistan and to actually learn a lesson on maybe how do we stay the hell out of situations like that in the future. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929. That was the day a mistrial was declared in the case of 16 textile mill unionists in North Carolina. The mistrial sparked 5 days of anti-union vigilante violence. Textile mill workers at Gastonia's Lorry Mill had been on strike since April 1st. They demanded higher wages and shorter work hours, union recognition, and an end to the hated stretch-out system. Soon, textile workers at Bessemer City's American Mill walked off the job in solidarity and joined the National Textile Workers Union. Ella Mae Wiggins was one of the strike leaders at American Mill. She was known for her militancy, but also for organizing black workers into the union. As the strike wore on, mill owners evicted dozens of families from company housing. Wiggins helped set up a tent city. On June 7th, sheriff's deputies attacked strikers who marched to Lorry Mill to call out remaining workers. The police arrived at the tent colony later that evening to disarm them, and Gastonia's police chief wound up dead. Immediately, more than 70 textile union members and leaders were rounded up and arrested. 16 stood trial for the murder of Chief Adderholt. The Anti-Union Committee of 100 smashed up the NTWU headquarters in Gastonia and Bessemer City. They kidnapped, beat, and threatened to kill several union members. The rampage continued as scab forces moved onto Charlotte to raid the offices of the International Labor Defense, who had handled the strikers' case. 5 days into the terror, Wiggins was killed on her way to a union solidarity rally. Outrage over her murder forced mill owners to improve conditions and wages. But the fight to organize would continue for years. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So good news today. Evidently, LeBron James has wrapped up his research and has gotten vaccinated. So that, I think, is going to be a good thing. I don't quite know what research LeBron was doing. Not sure. I would love to see the reading list that came along with that research. But I'm going to give him credit for coming out and saying, look, we got to do it. I kind of think it was the money. Just kind of throwing that out there, just a thought. But if that's the research that gets you there, evidently that's what's going to get us there. And if you look across the NBA, like 90% of the NBA is vaccinated. But the story is Kyrie Irving or some other person. When 90% of the people are vaccinated, somehow the message is, well, these few stragglers, these few outliners. Like we talked about yesterday, you got the healthcare system in North Carolina, 175 fired in the largest mass firing ever. You read the story, it was out of 35,000 employees, which meant like 99% of them had already been vaccinated. It's crazy where we are. And here to share some thoughts on just how crazy this is and maybe how we get the push to get us over the hurdle, I've asked Jill Rosenthal to come talk with us. Jill is the Director of Public Health at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. Jill, thanks for taking some time for us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here, Rick.
So let's start with LeBron James. I think it's a good thing. I think finally, about time. Should have happened a little bit sooner, I was hoping for. But he's a powerful guy, got a lot of followers, especially in the African-American community. I think this is a good thing.
Absolutely. I would agree with you 100%. I think, if nothing else, it shows that people need to get there when they're ready. And people get vaccinated for different reasons. And I don't know what research he did, but we hear that speaking to people that you trust is something that helps people get there. We've had lots of conversations about the kinds of information people need to feel comfortable if they see others in their community, and it worked for him and it got him where we're glad he's there. So we can be happy for that.
No, and look, he's a guy who clearly has access to the best medical care, the best medical advice, the best resources possible. And the message, hopefully, that comes out of that is, LeBron did his due diligence. Maybe others fall along. Because I had this interesting conversation today, in talking about LeBron, and there were people who were like, well, why aren't black men getting vaccinated at the same rates as everyone else? Because evidently the numbers are really low. And I could only think that it has something to do with how badly broken our healthcare system is, and that a lot of people don't have access to family doctors or regular healthcare in a provider that they trust.
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors, and you're pointing out some of them are access to the medical system. Some of it has to do with structural barriers, mistrust. The recent information is actually really interesting on the vaccination rates, and it's showing that the racial disparities have really kind of evened out, and they're not like they were at the beginning. When we saw really big disparities in terms of who was getting COVID, and then we saw that follow up with who was getting vaccinated. Those disparities in race are not so big anymore. So I think that we've done a good job of finding ways to encourage people, provide incentives, and make the vaccine accessible and convenient and available to people.
No, and that's a good thing. I'm glad to hear that. Because look, if we're going to get past this, we've all got to get past it. We've all got to be in this together and moving together in a somewhat cohesive manner. Now, the president they're in the process of issuing a temporary emergency mandate through OSHA to make sure that all workers are vaccinated, especially healthcare workers. And I pointed out a minute ago that the fact that you had this healthcare system in North Carolina, 35,000 employees, where 175 of them, evidently, if they get vaccinated, they can come back to work. They're gone. I had a bunch of other stories kind of along the same lines. And the healthcare folks are where we're going, hey, we need you to be vaccinated more than everybody else because, well, we don't want you to get other people sick. What power does the president have? Does he have the authority to do this? Does the Department of Labor have the ability to do this? I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that there is no question that having staff in any healthcare setting who are unvaccinated poses threats to patient safety and to fellow staff. So we don't want unvaccinated workers putting people at risk. It's a public health issue, and certainly healthcare providers, need to be at the forefront of that. President Biden does have that authority, and he's used that authority through the conditions of participation in Medicaid and Medicare. So any healthcare facility that is reimbursed by Medicaid or Medicare needs to meet certain conditions to be able to be reimbursed. And so one of these conditions is to ensure that folks that work in those facilities are vaccinated. There have been surprisingly some low rates of hospital and nursing home facility staff who have not been vaccinated, high rates of folks who have not been vaccinated. And so this is another step that the president can take, and it's a tool in the toolbox. And at this point, we know to get out of this situation we're in, we need as many people to be vaccinated as we can get vaccinated. And again, this is another tool that's available, and it's good to see that he's using the tools that he has.
Are we concerned that there will be at some point a mass exodus of people? Because we keep hearing these stories that, well, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to leave. And we hear a lot of people saying that out loud, but the numbers yet haven't borne that out. Are we expecting that?
Well, I think if you look at history, we would say no, that we are not expecting that mandates really do motivate people to act like their peers. And in fact, the vaccine mandates are actually quite popular in polls. So we know in the past that mandates have helped achieve high immunization rates for other diseases in schools and healthcare facilities. And even national polls are showing that about a third of unvaccinated respondents are saying that they would get the COVID vaccine if their employer required it of them. And the examples that we're seeing are actually bearing that out. So, in the healthcare system in particular, those that implemented early vaccine mandates have retained over 99% of their workforce. So sure, there's going to be issues, but there's a number of examples that I can share of where we're seeing that it actually does work. And, in fact, the public is in support of mandates. And in some polls are saying that they would consider quitting if their employers didn't mandate the vaccine. So
see, that's the story we don't hear enough of, because, I know a number of workplaces where the handful, the loudest, the loudest ones are getting all the attention. I'm never getting a vaccine. Well, you have a choice. And look, I'm not saying that we should be tying people down and jabbing them in the arm. I'm not saying we should be forcing them to have it. But, with choices come consequences. And the consequence here is, sorry, you can't be around the rest of us.
Exactly. I mean, the consequence is for all of us to be at risk from folks that don't want to be vaccinated. So, again, there's examples across both the public and private sector of where this is working. So Tyson Foods has a mandate. Even Fox Corporation has a mandate. They have 90% of employees who have been vaccinated since they put their vaccine requirement in. States are doing it. The state of Washington, the state of New York, and they're seeing the numbers are going up and folks are getting vaccinated. And so I think the evidence is showing that vaccine mandates do work and that they're popular. And I think the other issue is that they are good for the economy, because we know that the most effective way to return safely to full economic activity is by being vaccinated. And so this is one way to get those numbers up.
Yeah. Now we just saw that YouTube is saying that they're going to take down all of the anti-vax information, and I'm not a big censorship fan, But on a certain level, when you're just outright making things up, which is what a lot of this seems, some of this stuff seems to be, maybe you have to address some of this because misinformation seems to be one of the things that I get a lot of. You know, I heard this or I heard that, and they're mostly anecdotal. A cousin of a cousin, or Nicki Minaj, her cousin's friend's balls are huge because of the vaccine. Which you go, I don't know where that came from. But we hear these kind of anecdotal stories. Do you think it's a good idea to take those things down? Do you think it's something we have to do?
I absolutely do. The science is there, the research is there, and there's a pretty stringent process that the vaccines go through in order to be approved. And it's been through all the approval processes and with great results. And I think that we need to make sure that the information that's accurate is getting to folks and that they can make good decisions. And those are barriers. I mean, the biggest divide right now between vaccinated and unvaccinated is political party, which is unfortunate because it really should not be a partisan issue. And, if you look at the states that have implemented mandates, it isn't a partisan issue in terms of some of the states that have made vaccine requirements, and it really shouldn't be.
No,
it should be about public health protection.
No, absolutely. And this is where I started off today going, we're just not a serious people. We're not capable of critically thinking about situations and setting the politics of last November aside. We're evidently not capable of doing that because protecting yourself has now become a political issue. And look, I don't doubt had the former guy won that the other side would be doing kind of the same kind of craziness. It just I'm frustrated at this lack of critical thought.
Yeah, and I think this whole focus on kind of individual freedom negates the fact that we live in a society where you need that in order to have a society work. We have to protect each other, and it's not a unique situation. I mean, we do have seatbelt laws. You can point to plenty of other examples of where we constrain our own behavior to protect others around us. And I mean, even in the world of vaccines, most of us got them as children, and they were required in order to participate in public school. And so this is just another one, but it has just become, much more politicized than I think is healthy or helpful at this point. And again, we know that if we want to get ourselves out of this situation, vaccination is the way to do it.
But here's the thing, and this is where I point the finger at the extreme right of our political system, and the folks who, like the snake oil salesmen of the past, like the people who are out there selling, dietary supplements and beet juice or whatever it is as the next miracle cure. There seems to be a lot of people who are making profit off of this, and the fact that they're pushing these things that haven't been proven to be effective or even helpful. Again, it's another one of those things that make me go, misinformation is one thing, but the profiteers, the moneyed interests, they're the ones I think making it even worse.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we've just gotten to a place where people don't know what to trust anymore. And again, that's why it gets back to, I think, trusted messengers and who can deliver a message to people in a way that they can hear it. And we hear that often is your personal doctor. Most doctors do support vaccination, and so finding the way to reach people in a way that they can hear it is still really critical.
Yeah, I haven't met one yet that isn't selling something. And I look at these America's frontline doctors who we just now find out because of the anonymous hackers that they've been making millions off of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and all of this stuff. And again, it infuriates me because we know this. We know there are charlatans and hucksters out there who just want to dive into our pocket and don't really care about you, me, or anyone else. But time and time again, we learn this lesson.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, that's been the world of vaccine politics for a while, and it's an issue with false information about childhood vaccines that people hear it causes this or that, and things that are clearly not true and have been proven not to be true. But for some reason, we go back to this place over and over and over. But all you have to do is look around you really to see that, or follow the data. The folks that are hospitalized are folks who aren't vaccinated, and the folks who are dying predominantly are people who are not vaccinated.
Yeah, I hope folks will take a look at the piece, Mandatory COVID-19 Vaccination for Healthcare Workers as a Condition for Medicare and Medicaid Participation. It's a long title. We'll get some links out on social media how folks can take a look at the work you're doing there, because I think it's important. I think if anyone should be mandated to get the vaccine, it should be the people who are dealing with sick people. Just kind of throwing that out there as a thought.
Absolutely. They're vulnerable people, and we're doing our best to protect them. And I think, along with those folks who are healthcare workers or providers, I think the other piece that is big news is just Biden's efforts to have the Occupational Safety and Health Administration put in some requirements around large employers. And so that'll be the next piece that's coming. And I think will also take us to another level of protection, which is important.
Yeah, that's only something I've been calling for since, last March. Because look, I mean, you brought up Tyson Food a moment ago, and we know that they had some supervisors who were playing kind of a Deadpool kind of thing with their workers, seeing how many people can get infected and doing some really unsavory things. And I would say, look, that's the reason OSHA is here, to protect people in the workplace. So I'm glad to see that Marty Walsh, the Secretary of Labor, and the President are moving in a direction to protect people. Because look, you shouldn't go to work to die. That's just a way to feed your family.
Absolutely. And there are a number of great examples that are circulating. In addition, United Airlines is another one that has nearly all of their US-based workforce vaccinated as a result of their mandate. So again, it is doing the job. Yeah,
this is, again, my take on it from the beginning is if we can't figure it out through the wonders of self-governance, capitalism will, because employers don't want to get sued. They don't want their insurance premiums going up. Insurance companies don't want to pay for stuff. It just seems to me that capitalism will move us in that direction. But Jill, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing some thoughts on this piece that you guys have put out. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks so much. Nice to talk with you.
You as well. Appreciate the time. Jill Rosenthal. She is the Director of Public Health there at the Center for American Progress. Make sure you check out their website, americanprogress.org. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1789. That was the day that the United States Congress officially created the United States Army. Not everyone agreed that the U.S. should have a standing army. 2 years earlier, at the meeting that drafted the U.S. Constitution, James Madison warned against a permanent federal army. He told those at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, quote, "A standing military force with an overgrown executive will not long be safe companions to liberty." Since Madison was a strong proponent of a centralized federal government, his caution about the Army was noteworthy. Perhaps these warnings is why it took Congress until the last day of their session to finally approve the measure. In fact, President George Washington had to write Congress not once, but twice to get them to act on the issue. Once it was approved, the first standing army had about 800 members. By comparison, in 2015, the Army had just under 500,000 active duty soldiers. To supplement the small army, Congress also made a provision for the president to call up troops from state militias. The stated purpose for such call-ups was, quote, protecting the inhabitants of the frontiers of the United States from hostile incursions of the Indians. While in federal service, the state militias were supposed to receive, quote, the same as the pay and substance as the regular army. One time, various state militias were used for the forced removal of the Cherokee people from the southeast on the Trail of Tears in the 1830s. State militias were also deployed to break up labor strikes. Such is the case in the Homestead Strike in Pennsylvania in 1892. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I gotta tell you, I love listening to some of my Democrat friends complaining that these Democratic politicians they're not doing the thing. They're not moving Biden's agenda. They should all be on the same page. And look, I would love it if they would. The reason, and I always love the Roy Rogers quote, I'm not a member of an organized party, I'm a Democrat. I always love that because you look at what's going on. It's like herding cats. And at the front of the line, you've got Manchin and Sinema. How do you get them to come back? Well, figure out how to feed them a little bit. This will play itself out. We'll see where this takes us. But to think that, we're going to all just fall in the line, not going to happen. Understand, policy's really popular. Should be talking more about policies, less than Joe Manchin. And here to share some thoughts on how we get these popular policies moved through and maybe do a little bit better with messaging. Kind of a thought. I've asked Annette Shanker-Azario to come talk with us. She's the principal and founder of ASO Communications. Annette, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So, like I said, you look at the fact that our Democratic policy is wildly popular. We want, money to help keep kids out of poverty. We want education for kids on the front end and when they go on to college. Granny needs new chompers and some goggles and all that stuff. Popular stuff. How come we can't get it through? How come we can't message this? How is it Mitch McConnell is the Lucy and pulls the football away every time?
Yeah. Well, first, let me just acknowledge, as a big acknowledgement for me, that not everything is a messaging problem. There may, in fact, be members of the Democratic Party in leadership who don't necessarily share our values and our views and want to get it done. But you asked me a messaging question, so let me answer that. First thing that I would say is I often tell my clients, don't take your policies out in public. That is unseemly. Policies are great for insider baseball kinds of conversations, but much like when you are wandering through the grocery store and you see that box of instant brownies and you look at the front of that box, what is there a picture of? A brownie, right? But when you open up the box, there's no brownie in that box. There's a bunch of powder. And on the back, there's a set of steps you need to take. We need to stop selling the recipe and start selling the brownie. And it's funny because in your description, Rick, you sort of predicted what I was going to say. You were selling the recipe. Pardon me. You were selling the brownie and not the recipe. So when we look, for example, at a policy like paid family leave or universal health care or raising the minimum wage, wildly popular things, when we say instead, you're there the first time your newborn smiles, or you're paid enough to put food on the table and you're home in time to eat it, when we sell the outcome of the policy, wildly more popular and perhaps more vital, more likely to increase mobilization. Because again, often our messaging trouble is not that people don't think our ideas are right, it's that they don't think our ideas are possible. And so our opposition isn't the opposition, it's actually cynicism. And so it's about messaging that will mobilize, not garner just agreement, but repetition. No. And that's where we need to be talking about outcomes and not the names of our policies.
You're spot on there. I always say that Republicans talk in terms of narratives. They tell stories. Democrats seem to want to show you how smart they are and how wonky we can be. And I'm like, no. How are you going to make my life better? How are we going to get things done? How am I going to get that hole patched in front of my house? How am I going to make 100%. Sure that my kids get an education or health care or any of the things that again, are popular? To me, it's the pitch.
And it's oftentimes when we try to make ourselves what I like to call the reasonable adults in the room, so we say things, for example, like doing universal health care will be cheaper. Well, it turns out when you actually test that kind of message, a message that it will be cheaper, which of course is true. I'm not debating what's true or false here. Folks who are persuadable in the sample, folks who are on the fence, who could go either way and aren't quite sure what to think, so non-ideologically cemented folks, that actually reaffirms the opposition's narrative. Because when you tell folks it's going to be cheaper if we do it this way, what you're doing is you are giving into the opposition's frame. You are tacitly acknowledging that the way to make public policy decisions is, will it grow GDP? Will it shrink GDP? Will it be more money? Will it be less money? So you tell people first and foremost, that's how to evaluate this.
Right.
And then you actually raise the suspicions that they're most afraid of. The idea that it's going to be crappy healthcare, that you're going to be waiting forever and ever, the horror stories and lies they've been fed about quote unquote socialized medicine, that there's going to be rationing. Instead, what effective messaging does is it seizes the moral high ground. It says things like life and health shouldn't be for sale, or no matter what we look like or where we come from, when someone we love is ill or injured, we want them to get the very best care without fearing that we'll go bankrupt for them to do it. So you want to talk just like what you said, in imageable terms. How will this feel walking through my life? Not what is the name of your 67-point plan.
Yeah, no, exactly. On the universal health care front, I talk to people who are about my age who are looking towards retirement. I go, had we a universal health care system where you didn't have to worry about health care, you could go do something with the final years of your life that you want to do. We could actually take on jobs that would be our passion instead of we're stuck in this job for 30 years because we got to have the health care. And this is why I've always said employers don't want to get rid of it, because they want to make sure that you're tied to that job to get that health care, because it's always been curious to me why corporate America wants it other than as a controlling tool.
Absolutely, because in point of fact, they have plenty of people who are good at math working for them, and they know that in the long run, and even in the short run, it would save them money, because whatever increases in taxes they would save in premiums, even at the pittance and the sort of ungenerous plans that they actually finance, it's exactly what you say. It's about a lack of freedom. It's about being tethered. And what's ironic about that is that concept, freedom, which is something that the right wing has co-opted, utilized, and the left has been all too frequently scared to use, actually turns out to be one of the most effective animating values we can have on our side. And it's not at all shocking, right, that marriage equality, when it moved from the right to marry to the freedom to marry, and when it moved away from practical benefits, again, that's the adults in the room, like married filing jointly, hospital visitation, toward emotional arguments like love is love and love makes a family, that we began to gain ground. The same is true with the fight for 15. When we were told to talk about wages through practical terms like, we need to raise wages because people will be customers in our stores and we have a consumer-driven economy, people wouldn't repeat that, because no one gets out of bed in the morning thinking, I'm real passionate about the GDP and I can't wait how to grow it. But when we instead saw folks saying, people who work for a living ought to earn a living, and obviously I'm biased because I work on these things, right? So I work on this messaging,
right,
not objective in evaluating it. But when we switched to a moral high ground argument that wasn't about customers in our stores and making sure that people can afford the basics, but instead asserting the money to pay people comes from their work, why aren't they getting it?
No, it's an excellent point. And I would argue the longer version about the economy and all that stuff, which, look, is a byproduct of higher wages, but it doesn't fit really nicely on a bumper sticker. And sadly, what's happened in our society is our thinking has continually shrunk down to, now we need bumper stickers and sloganeering and tweet levels. And now, fortunately, Twitter did increase their number of characters, so maybe we're expanding our thoughts a little bit. But it seems like we're just social media thinkers, and we're not boiling it down to that emotional level in a more digestible level, in my thoughts.
Yeah, and it is understandable that we want to blame social media and the character limits and so on. And that certainly has a huge role to play in terms of, for example, when we look at attention spans around digital ads and how long people will watch a thing without clicking off of it. It is completely obvious, and you can sort of trace the trajectory of that shortening to the advent of social media, the increase of things like TikTok. But as far as the fact that we think through what people in my profession would call heuristics or simplifying structures, that's just a basic facet of human cognition that predates social media, predates the internet.
Yeah.
And in fact, what we see, and this shocks most people, is that the more higher education that you have, the more adept you are at discounting factual information that doesn't fit your pre-existing frame.
Really?
Yeah. What we like to say is that facts bounce off of frames. I often tell people that a more accurate way of thinking about our brains is I'll see it when I believe it, not the other way around. This is why people tell us, I don't see racism, it's not happening. I don't see sexism, it's not occurring. Because the instances of those things that happen before your eyes, if you're not taught to categorize it as such, you simply are like, well, that's not an instance of that. That's not an instance of working people being screwed. That's not an instance of corporate malfeasance. Or, that happened once, but that's not a pattern. That's not how things work.
Okay.
And the reason why people with a greater amount of formal education are really good at discounting facts that don't fit their pre-existing frames is because they have more cemented cognitive biases.
Interesting. I see. I would have thought it would be kind of the other way around. The more that you knew, maybe the more you would kind of weigh the differences. So you're saying that the deeper I'm invested in my education, the more I'm going to be dug in, as opposed to if I barely got out of high school biology and now I'm a virologist and I'm not getting the vaccine.
So there's two different phenomena. There is the phenomena of folks whose cognition is very, very closely attached, not to rational thought, but to behavioral, to emotional cues and identity. And that tends to correspond with lower levels of formal education. And that is sort of all of the stuff that we know about that you're describing of tribalism. And a lot of that identity, some people's identity actually as an element of it is refusing to listen to people and outside of that identity group and sort of prejudging people outside of your identity group as being wrong, before they even speak. I'm just talking about the very specific thing of being able to accidentally wander through an airport. You see Fox News, they're blathering some bullshit. And you're like, oh, I know that that's not true, right? And you have sort of a very sophisticated analysis around why that fact that's presented to you is in fact completely biased.
Well, just because it's on Fox News, that's all you need to know, or at least that's my thought. But no, it sounds like you're right. So are we screwed? I mean, is this where both everyone, the most intelligent and the most dim, are dug in? Is there any movement?
Yeah, I mean, my theory of change is that you have, this is just a theory, this is sort of corroborated through a lot of people's study and evidence. You have a group of people who are ideologically cemented on the left, right? I'm going to say that's me. I'm going to guess that's you. Someone could talk at you all day long, I'm going to guess, and you're never going to believe in abolishing the minimum wage. There is no argument a person's going to make. You're never going to believe in a flat tax, right? No one could say anything to you that's going to get you there. Same with me across lots of issues. Just like there are folks like us on the left who are ideologically not moving, there are people like that on the right. But in terms of issues, now I'm not talking about partisan, I'm not talking about party yet, I'm talking about how we feel about issues. Most people actually fall somewhere in the middle. They are what I like to call the good point people. They go like this: good point, but also good point. They are swayed by arguments from either side, and what they hear repeated most frequently becomes the way the world works, common sense, what is true. This is the only way to explain the rapidity with which our culture has shifted in our views about, to take an example I used earlier, marriage equality, right? It wasn't that long ago that it seemed completely and totally inconceivable that we would legalize gay marriage in this country, and here we are. So what gets repeated most often? I mean, this is both frightening and it is also empowering. Messages that are familiar to people are reported to be more likable, more credible, more moving. So what people hear repeated over and over again actually becomes more true for them because it creates what we like to call cognitive ease. It's like when you hear da 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 and your brain goes da da. When your brain does that for you and you don't have to work, you like that message better. It feels comfortable because it feels familiar. So basically, the name of the game is finding messages that the choir is going to want to sing, that is going to get folks to repeat a thing so that the middle hears it. Because the way that we persuade people is actually by having their peer network do it, not by having sort of professional organizations do it.
Interesting. So real quick then, what's the message on this infrastructure bill? Because everybody I know wants this infrastructure bill, especially the bipartisan part of it. But we also want the human infrastructure part of it. What's that messaging that will get us to that place to make us all warm and fuzzy with it?
Yeah. So if you specifically mean infrastructure as opposed to the Build Better,
the Build Back Better part.
Thank you. Build Back Better. Thank you. So much for me being on top of my messaging, right? So if we're talking about infrastructure, what we see in survey after survey after survey, people don't have feelings about infrastructure, right? Like you never hugged infrastructure. That's not a word that most people use in their common everyday vocabulary. So first and foremost, we want to make it imageable, make it tangible for people. So the road that you drive on, the bridge that you cross, the bus that your grandmother takes, being able to cross town and get to where you need to go on time. So first of all, using that kind of language. And then again, selling the payoff, not the recipe. So this bill is about where we need to go and how we're going to get there. It's about the roads we drive on and the jobs that we're able to have. It's about bringing clean, renewable, it's about bringing clean energy into our communities, protecting the air that we breathe and the water that we put in our kids' cups. So it's really about bringing it back to sort of how would these things feel as part of my everyday life?
Yeah. How do you make my life better? And this is where I started off the beginning of the year. It's about getting things done. It's about making people's lives better. It's about moving the country forward. And it's about getting the internet that is actually not costing an arm and a leg, that is still somewhat decent in a rural community. That, to me, that's the big one. But Annette, I appreciate you taking some time for sharing your expertise. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Annette Shanker Azario. She's the principal and founder of ASO Communications. Make sure you check out their website, asocommunications.com. Going to take a quick break right here. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1931. Canadian coal miners, their wives, and children marched through the streets of Estevan, Saskatchewan. The miners were on strike for union recognition and better pay and working conditions. Safety was a major concern for the 600 men and boys who worked in the mines. Water collected in many work areas. Too often, the mine companies failed to replace rotting timber, so roof cave-ins were frequent. Inadequate ventilation led to high concentrations of carbon dioxide. For braving this dangerous underground work, the miners earned only 25 cents for each ton of coal. The miners had joined the Mine Workers Union of Canada earlier that year. They called a strike in September, but coal mine operators refused to meet their demands. Miners and their families decided to demonstrate in the town of Estevan to gain community support. The mayor banned the demonstration and called upon the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to crush the march. The Mounties met several hundred miners and their families and attempted to block the procession. They opened fire on the unarmed crowd. 3 striking miners were killed and many others were wounded and arrested. Finally, on October 6th, the mine owners finally agreed to an 8-hour workday and a minimum wage of $4 a day. But they refused to recognize the union. It was not until the end of World War II that the United Mine Workers finally won recognition in the Saskatchewan coalfields. The strike remains a controversial event in Estevan. The 3 miners who were killed have the inscription "Murdered by RCMP" on their headstones. Over the years, locals have alternately erased and restored these inscriptions. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
When Donald Trump declared he would fix the U.S. Postal Service, he was using the word fix the same way veterinarians do when you bring in your dog. Trump wasted an inordinate amount of his presidential power and prestige in a failed attempt to neuter an agency that literally delivers for the people. Extraordinary postal workers move our letters and packages by truck, car, airplane, boat, motorbike, mule, and of course by foot, to any address across town or across the country. Both essential and effective, it's the most popular federal agency, with 91% of the public approving its work. Thus, an uproar of protest killed Trump's attempt to gut it. When it comes to bad public policy, however, failure is just a way of saying, let's try the back door. Trump was defeated, but he left behind an undistinguished Postmaster General named Louis DeJoy, who had only 2 qualifications for the job. He was a Trump mega-donor, and he was a peer of corporate powers that have long wanted to privatize the Postal Service. In March, before the new Biden presidency had taken charge of the postal system, DeJoy popped through the back door with his own 10-year plan to fix the agency. Rhetorically, his plan promised to, quote, achieve service excellence by making mail delivery more consistent and reliable. How? By consistently cutting service and reliably gouging customers. Specifically, DeJoy proposed to close numerous mail processing facilities, eliminate jobs, reduce post office hours of service, and cut the standard of delivering our first-class mail from 3 days to 5. Oh, also raise stamp prices. This is Jim Hightower saying delivering lousy service at higher prices is intended to destroy public support, opening up the service to takeover by private profiteers. And who gets joy from that? The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some fun today. Joe Manchin put out a statement. Talked about fiscal sanity. Concerned that we're not going to be able to pay Social Security and Medicare, and that's why we can't do anything else, evidently. He's now concerned about the spending. Still pushing his strategic pause, which I said from the beginning, and for those who said I was crazy months ago, I fear we get nothing. I'm sticking with that. I said it back months ago, and here we are. And I don't even think Manchin's the worst part of it. But here to share some thoughts on, well, will we get something on the infrastructure front? Will we get anything? Will one, the other, both, nothing? That's why I've asked our good friend Mateus Vernango to come talk with us. Mateus is an economics professor at Bucknell University, one of the smartest guys I know on the economics front. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, no, thank you for having me, Rick.
So, we getting anything? Is this going to happen? Or is this going to go down in flames?
Well, I wish it's one of those things, I'm smart enough to tell you I'm not sure. And I wish, I could say it's a simple one that I wish we get something, meaning I wish they compromise and at least we get the the smaller package, the bipartisan 1 trillion spending bill going through. But the thing is, as you said, it was sort of built up in a way that I think I should say I think honestly Biden and the administration did have a good strategy. The first time that there was a strategy in place in order to bind these sort of smaller, acceptable for both sane Republicans and conservative Democrats bill that they could jointly pass, but also tying almost everything else that is part of the Democratic agenda, including Biden. So that, expansion of Medicare, expansion of, rights, things like, not healthcare, childcare, many provisions that not just infrastructure, social benefits that are necessary
Right.
for a society that has been on a down spiral for workers for a very long while. And so, and the Democrats have been fighting for a very long while, and they had this strategy which made it very reasonable. So we tie these two things together. So we passed this one that it's bipartisan, and that has to go with this other one that it's for everybody. Whether we're gonna see that or not, and I think again, Biden didn't go to Chicago today. He stayed. He had meetings with both Sinema and Manchin. So clearly the administration is trying to get this, and they have asked a number. And I don't think they got a number from Manchin or Sinema. What would be the number that they would accept? And that's the part that frightens me about all of this. If I had a number, I would say, okay, they're trying to bargain it down, but it seems they're trying to kill it.
Yeah. No, Manchin did say on the one Sunday show that, $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion, maybe he came up because the one woman did try and hammer him down on a number. And I'm of the mindset, look, at this point, I'll take the $1.5 trillion just to get us moving and to get things into place.
If he signs and we vote in the $1.5 trillion, sure, I would agree with you. But if it's an open sort of end, I'm not sure what I would, if I was one of the person in the Progressive Caucus and you ask me what to do, I'll tell you the truth. I wouldn't know what to tell you because it seems like what they want is to just stay with the small one. And I should say, and there is a lot of money that both Manchin and Sinema have received the biggest numbers of the funds from donors associated to all the sort of wrong corporate interests. So,
well, there was a story the other day.
Not helpful.
Yeah, there was the story the other day where Sinema got $750,000 $750,000 from Big Pharma, and then voted and basically killed the drug bill that would help lower prices. And this is where you come back to the world that we're in.
All of this is maddening, and again, it's maddening not just because of the politics of it. I should say the other thing that it's and I don't even want to go on how much Republicans have been playing politics with this because they we're tying in all of this, the debt ceiling and the shutdown of the government, and they're playing absolutely politics with that. But I should say all of this is unnecessary because there is no danger that we're overspending, that we are, that the government has no ability to pay, that inflation is around the corner. All of those fears are absolutely not reasonable. And so we are in a situation in which 5 million jobs still have been lost and have not been recovered. The economy is still in a iffy recovery because we're in the middle of a pandemic that, sure, Delta is, thank God, coming down, but, it's still not gone. There are still supply constraints here and there. There are still a lot of people hurting. And so the notion that we are on the verge of an economy that's close to full employment, that inflation is around the corner, there is inflation, but the kind of inflation that we have had is because of the supply constraints, not because we have healthy economy close to full employment, and also the kind of inflation that I want to see, the inflation that is driven by wages and by people getting, so that wages are winning prices, against prices, and that people are getting, because they have more bargaining power, they have the ability to, not corporations getting more money, because they can charge you, and so on and so forth, but because people can get higher wages, and corporations are forced to reduce their margins, and that's not happening. It hasn't happened, in our generation. I mean, you have to go back to the 70s when I was a kid to have something like that in the United States. And so the notion that we, and we talked about this last time I was here, or the previous time, this is not that 70s show. We're not in that position yet. And so those years, it's not just the politics of it that it's managing. It's the economics of it, the technical stuff. It's not there. So this other part is not a question of what my personal preferences. Sure, I prefer, a broader, sort of more inclusive welfare state. But forget that for a second. There's no reason that, if you wanted to spend, let's say that you were a Republican very concerned with the American position externally, and you think we should spend way more in the military. We have space, actually, to do all of those things. There is no reason why the American government cannot spend. I wouldn't say let's go and spend a lot more in the military and stay in Afghanistan. But, so I think that's a mistake. But it's not like we don't have the resources. So
right.
If we have the resources to rebuild schools in Afghanistan, as we did over the last 2 decades, we should have the money to, improve the living, conditions of people in the United States.
No, that just makes a little bit of common sense. But here we are in this moment, and as you pointed out, there's some economic problems. There's some things going on. Still in the middle of the pandemic. We've got supply chain shortages. We've got all this stuff going on, and now the Republicans choose to manufacture a crisis by holding us hostage for what I'm still not quite sure what they want, other than scorched earth or chaos. Are you getting anything out of what they actually want for this?
That's it. I will say something. I was munching today about this, and I've been thinking about this. And if they go crazy, I think we should go crazy too. So because what they're saying is we're not going to pay the debt. Okay, so you're not going to pay the debt that it's already accrued. So and there's no reason not to pay it because it's that in domestic. I always say this, coming from Argentina, having been raised in Brazil, we sometimes take that in foreign currency, in dollars. And that one, the Brazilian government, the Argentinian government cannot pay in their own currency. So, they have limitations. This is purely debt in domestic currency. The U.S. has no limitation. It doesn't mean that the U.S. can do whatever they want. No, sure, there are limits. But, there's no significant danger, and there shouldn't be any danger of the United States defaulting on its debt. And the reason that they're putting this is exactly to score, political points. So if they're going to, put the American economy on the, brink of collapse because of this, I think because there's nothing that forbids the government to continue spending and fund the debt. And the question then, it's a constitutional question. Is this debt ceiling, for example, constitutional? And I'm not, you should invite a lawyer to discuss that stuff. But I've heard many things that suggest that this is unconstitutional, and unconstitutional. And so they should test that limit. What happens?
Yeah, I just think it's stupid. The time to argue over spending is before you spend the money, not after you've spent it. I mean, this is just weird to me. And again, I come back to, I understood the past when Mitch McConnell and the Republicans during the Obama years wanted Obama to fail. They had things they wanted, like sequester. They had to get the sequester. They had to cut because they were obsessed with squeezing the quarter till the eagle screamed. And then we came in with Trump, and it was spent like drunken sailors, and you didn't hear a peep out of them.
Well, but this has been going on for a while. I always tell my students here at Bucknell. So, if you look at historically, since Gerald Ford, we have to go back all the way to Ford. The Republicans have been the party of big government. They spend more when they come in. I mean, Ford increased spending, and the deficits went up. Same for Reagan, same for Trump, for Bush Senior, same for Bush Junior, same for Trump. They deficits go up because they cut taxes for the wealthy. They spend more in the military, and so deficits and spending go up. And in reverse, Democrats have become the party of small government, trying to preserve but not expand. The only expansion that has been since Nixon and an environmental agency, it's been Obamacare. and of the welfare state. I mean, young expansion of welfare programs, and all three of them, Carter, Clinton and Obama, with differences. I'm not saying that are all equal, and but they all had lower spending at the beginning. I mean, after you take Obama's 2009 package, it's diminishing spending and lower deficits. So the party of fiscal responsibility, and I'm not a huge fan of the term, has been the Democratic Party. And Republicans have been the party of big spending, big government, but it's big government for the very wealthy and the corporations. And that's an important part of this story. So what they're doing is the bidding of corporation, of corporate America and wealthy individuals. So they're guaranteeing that we're not going to tax them. And I think that one of the important things here in this discussion is that Biden has bought, because I think it's the moment of this, Biden has bought into the idea that we have to tax the wealthy, that the wealthy have run amok, that they don't pay their fair share.
Yeah, about time.
That, it's high time that they pay their fair share. And I think that that's the danger in this. That's the debate we're having, and it's a debate important. So it is political. It is as much as it was for Obama, because the 2024 election is already being fought here. I think if we don't pass this stuff, it's going to be very difficult to win. Whoever goes, if he goes for re-election or Kamala or whoever it is, but it's going to be much harder.
No, 2022 is going to be a bloodbath if you don't get something done. Not that 2022 is going to be easy, even if you do. But I've talked to people who've already said
2022 is going to be an uphill. I meant 2024 presidential. I mean, because let's be serious. The American system is such that the likelihood of passing stuff it's this year and some part of next year, but then we're gone, because then we're already in campaign mode, and it will be 2 years of campaign mode.
Yep. So
Obama had basically 2 years of government. The rest was, he got reelected, and then they blocked everything else he did in the second term. So he had 2 years out of 8, and then he resisted. And I wish we had those 8 years. I mean, I'd rather have those 8 years than any the 4 years with Trump. Good Lord, I always say destroying is much easier than constructing stuff, and that's the danger. We have a party that comes into power to destroy stuff,
yep.
And they're very good at destroying stuff. And then we have a party that we're bickering about how to construct stuff. And constructing is admittedly harder than destroying. But we should get our act together and start constructing stuff.
No, I'm right there with you. My grandfather used to say any idiot can tear down a house. It takes someone with a little skill to build it. And we're seeing this playing out right in front of us. So in looking at what we're going to come up against in the next couple of days, you've got the debt ceiling coming, the possible government shutdown. You got the infrastructure vote that may or may not happen. I guess tomorrow they're talking about it. It's probably not going to. Probably going to push that off a little bit. It seems like McConnell's plan of stall, delay, and draw out to try and run out the clock to get to where you said next year, nothing going to get done. That seems to be the plan to me.
Yes, no, I would agree, and again, I think that the play here is for Democrats, and I think Biden is on. I think I would say this surprisingly to me, but I think Biden is not just for show, appearing to be on the side of the progressives on this. I think he has bought into the Democratic program, he's closer to the progressives on this debate. So he's trying to get Sinema and Manchin to agree to something. So I am, less hopeful I was last time, let's put it that way, that we are going to get, I don't think we're going to get the 3.5, but, I'm hopeful that we are going to, I'm hopeful that I hope we do get the bipartisan one, and obviously that we don't shut down and we don't do anything crazy like defaulting on that, which is unnecessary. But I do hope we do get some sort of expanded social spending, because that's not just necessary for the Democratic Party to win the election in 2024. No,
it's necessary for the country. Ultimately, we need the investment.
It's necessary for the people. It's necessary for everybody. It's necessary for our souls. It's necessary to be able to look in the mirror and say that we're not all losing it. I think that we're at that point. The last 4 years were pretty harsh. Post-Trump, on top of that, a pandemic, things have been very difficult. So I think that the country needs that, and if we don't do it, I think we're on the verge of a social crisis that, we haven't seen in a very long while.
So you have some fear that we could be heading for, if all this goes the wrong way, we could be heading for really, really troubled waters.
Oh yeah, I mean, let's be serious. We had a riot with people entering the,
Point taken.
Yes,
there it is. And I don't see that. I don't see that going away anytime soon either.
Yes.
But Mateus, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing your expertise. As always, frightful stuff. I'm hoping we get some stuff done.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Our good friend Mateus Verdango, professor of economics there at Bucknell. Love to hear your thoughts. Are you concerned? Is inflation taking a bite? Have you seen your wages go up? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929. That was the day a mistrial was declared in the case of 16 textile mill unionists in North Carolina. The mistrial sparked 5 days of anti-union vigilante violence. Textile mill workers at Gastonia's Lorry Mill had been on strike since April 1st. They demanded higher wages and shorter work hours, union recognition, and an end to the hated stretch-out system. Soon, textile workers at Bessemer City's American Mill walked off the job in solidarity and joined the National Textile Workers Union. Ella Mae Wiggins was one of the strike leaders at American Mill. She was known for her militancy, but also for organizing black workers into the union. As the strike wore on, mill owners evicted dozens of families from company housing. Wiggins helped set up a tent city. On June 7th, sheriff's deputies attacked strikers who marched to Lorry Mill to call out remaining workers. The police arrived at the tent colony later that evening to disarm them, and Gastonia's police chief wound up dead. Immediately, more than 70 textile union members and leaders were rounded up and arrested. 16 stood trial for the murder of Chief Adderholt. The Anti-Union Committee of 100 smashed up the NTWU headquarters in Gastonia and Bessemer City. They kidnapped, beat, and threatened to kill several union members. The rampage continued as scab forces moved onto Charlotte to raid the offices of the International Labor Defense, who had handled the strikers' case. 5 days into the terror, Wiggins was killed on her way to a union solidarity rally. Outrage over her murder forced mill owners to improve conditions and wages. But the fight to organize would continue for years. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Interesting new study put out by the folks at the Illinois Economic Policy Institute found that people who went through apprenticeship programs, the building trades apprenticeship program, something I've been telling my kids about. Look, learn to be an electrician, learn to be a plumber, go through the union apprenticeship programs. You get to earn money while you're learning. You don't have to take on a lifetime of student loan debt, and you make really, really good money doing it. They came out with a number that it kind of stopped me in my tracks. They said that on an adjusted for inflation income basis, what they found is the fiscal outcomes for construction workers, and in union work settings and in non-union work settings versus all other workers by level of education. And what they came out with was, someone who had, less than a high school education was probably going to make somewhere around $23,000 a year. and the lower chance of having health insurance, virtually no chance of having a retirement, any of that stuff. When they looked at high school education, they said like 38 grand a year you'd make, some college, but you didn't get a degree, just under 40. An associate's degree, they pump you up to 48 grand. And then, up from there, bachelor's degree, 68, an advanced degree, 96. What they found is in the union construction field, people were making over 58 grand a year with just a high school education. So you're looking at, an additional, like a $20,000 premium for being a union member and getting through some of these programs. In the non-union sector, what they found is there was almost no difference between a high school graduate and a non-union construction worker. It was that union advantage. It was that ability to collectively bargain. And the bigger part of that grabbed my attention was the fact that in the construction industry, unionized workers had like almost 90% of them had private health insurance. Almost 70% of them had private pension plans. Whereas in the non-union sector, what you saw is just over half had health insurance and not even a quarter had pension plans. And you go, why is this important? Well, I mean, what's coming? And I hope we get this infrastructure bill. I do. I know I've been negative about getting things through because, look, I know how Democrats operate sometimes. I would love nothing more than to see the bipartisan bill pass, along with the human infrastructure path, the Build Back Better plan, because there's so much in that we need. And even if it's not funded like I would like it to see funded, we got to get it into place so that we start moving it and we get moving in that direction. But here's the thing. If we get any infrastructure bill, we need people who are going to be able to pour concrete, to wire things, to drive heavy machinery. We need people with skills, and nobody does this better than the building trades and their apprenticeship programs. And I saw this study, and I'm like, this is what we should be pushing people into. These are solid, good, family-sustaining wage jobs with retirement security and all of that stuff. And yet, I don't think we hear enough of this. At least not in the circles that I hear people talk about. The idea that we get people the job training that they need, and the ability to have a collective bargaining agreement that's going to increase their wages. Now, look, I know some electricians who are making six figures. They're good electricians. I know welders who are doing incredibly well because we need them. If we're going to rebuild our roads and bridges, we kind of need people who are going to be able to do it. And this seems to be one of those things that I think we've left behind. And I'll tell you, I've always said you respect the job. I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care what it is. There should be respect. There should be dignity in that job. There should be reward for work. And that's not been the way it's been for a long time. Now, I love what Mateus said a minute ago. He goes, look, we're getting a little bit of inflation, but the good kind. Because we've been trained like Pavlovian dogs to every time we hear the word inflation to start foaming. And, as he was talking about, this ain't the 70s, he's right, because I remember my grandparents. They bought their house in the late 60s, mid to late 60s. And by the middle 70s, their mortgage was a joke because my grandfather was making that in a day. Because we had that inflationary period during the 70s. And understand, inflation is good for debtors. Because you're going to get more wages, you're going to be able to pay off your debt. Not so good for people who have a lot of money. And, that's why we have this obsession. This is why every time you turn around, we have to talk about it. We have to crush inflation. Look, I hate paying more for things just like anybody else, but wages have to keep up. And that's the difference. If we have inflation where just prices go up and you can't afford anything, that's a problem. But I'm looking around and some of the wage structures are moving upward. That is a good thing. Now is the time to put this into law. Now is the time to go, look, everybody's paying $15 an hour. Everybody. It's time to pass a $15 an hour minimum wage. We can do it now because people are paying it now. Because here's the concern. Year or two down the road, they go, well, you know, I'm going to start clawing some of that back. And prices are going to stay sticky. They're going to stay where they are. Wages are going to fall. We're going to have problems. This is why I keep saying the number one thing we should be doing right now is organizing people into unions, get those wages, those benefits, all of the nice things that they're throwing out just to get people in the door. Get it in writing. Put it in a contract. Make it enforceable. Hold them to it. Just my thought. Love to hear yours, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Are you afraid of the inflation? Do you think things are getting out of hand? I know I had a conversation today with a friend who was like, oh my God, gas is $3.25. I go, yeah, it's been around $3 for a while. But his wages went up $5 an hour. Going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The storm's 150-mile-an-hour winds wreaked havoc on offshore oil production platforms, as well as onshore oil and gas processing plants.
Hurricane Ida's destruction caused a record number of oil spills in the Gulf of Mexico. Today's children face more climate disasters than their grandparents, new study warns. Plus,
11 felony charges and 20 misdemeanors. Charges include 4 homicides.
California utility PG&E charged in wildfire that killed 4.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
A new report says that animals are shape-shifting in response to the climate crisis. Same here. These aren't love handles, okay? Before the sea levels rise, I'm growing my own water wings.
I know the feeling. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, well, the Republicans in the Senate are trying to destroy the country and the global economy, basically, but they're also screwing over a bunch of natural disaster victims right now.
Yes, they are. On Monday, Senate Republicans blocked legislation to suspend the debt ceiling, which pays for spending already incurred, and to keep the government in operation, which also blocked emergency disaster aid for victims of Hurricane Ida.
Well done, Republicans.
Speaking of Hurricane Ida, NOAA reports that the deadly storm, which made a direct hit on Louisiana and caused billions of dollars in damages, also caused an unprecedented number of oil spills in the Gulf of Mexico. 55, a new record. The new analysis underscores the fragility of the oil industry's aging infrastructure on the Gulf Coast as hurricanes become more intense and extreme due to man-made global warming caused by the oil industry.
Ironic, ain't it?
Back to Congress, an intense time for President Joe Biden's climate agenda as Democratic congressional leaders work to feverishly forge a path forward with a handful of so-called moderate Democrats on Biden's Build Back Better Act reconciliation package as Republicans throw wrenches into the machinery. DeSmog Blog reports that the oil industry has launched an all-out pressure campaign to kill off a proposal by congressional Democrats to tax the industry for the first time for its methane leaks, an extremely powerful greenhouse gas, in order to fund climate programs.
And they don't like that for some reason?
They don't. And it matters because a new study projects that even if countries fulfill their current pledges to cut greenhouse gas emissions, children born in 2020 will, on average, endure 7 times more extreme heat waves and more than twice as many droughts over their lifetimes as their grandparents.
Wow.
Today's children will also see almost 3 times as many river floods and crop failures and twice the number of wildfires as people born 60 years ago.
Sorry, kids. We tried.
And that is on average. Increases in exposure will be much higher in some countries. It's the first research to assess how climate extremes will affect different age groups and highlights the intergenerational injustice posed by the climate crisis.
Grim.
In other news, in Northern California, prosecutors have charged electric utility giant Pacific Gas and Electric with 4 counts of homicide and multiple other felonies for its role in causing the 2020 Zog fire near Redding, which killed 4 people and destroyed hundreds of homes.
Of course, no one will go to jail, even if they are found guilty. They have been charged before with manslaughter, and I cannot believe the state has not taken over PG&E at this point and put them out of our misery.
State fire investigators found the Zog fire was sparked by a dying tree that PG&E knew was dangerously close to its transmission lines. Here's Shasta County District Attorney Stephanie Bridget.
If you've got a known hazard that sits for 2 years, it's just not an accident. They knew it was there, they left it, they didn't remove it, and people died.
Last year, the company pleaded guilty to 84 counts of manslaughter over a 2018 blaze that destroyed the town of Paradise.
Why not? No one's going to jail.
But some good news.
Good.
In Germany, a good sign for climate policy after the country's center-left party, the Social Democrats, narrowly defeating retiring Chancellor Angela Merkel's Conservative Party in federal elections, with the environmentalist Green Party coming in a very strong third. Here in the U.S., the Biden EPA has issued major rules to cut HFCs, greenhouse gases used in refrigeration that are hundreds of thousands of times more powerful than CO2. The new standards are widely backed by industry and will ultimately cut HFCs by 85% over the next 15 years. Finally, Norway has set a national target of 2025 to ban sales of new gasoline and diesel vehicles.
Wow.
But it turns out on its current trajectory, the country is on track to reach 100% electric vehicle sales as early as April.
Wow.
Yes.
Well done, Norway. It can be done. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently the guy who showed up to the January 6th insurrection wearing his Team USA jacket has pled guilty. He's agreed he's going to help. He's going to do what he can do to help keep himself out of jail. He's the guy who ran around saying, F Nancy Pelosi and F Chuck Schumer and all of that. I'm curious what he's going to end up with. He could have gotten what was a maximum sentence of 20 years. Those sentencing guidelines, they say, call for somewhere between 21 and 27 months. So it'll be interesting to see if the Olympic swimmer will be spending a boatload of time as a guest of the state. But you never wear a license plate to a crime. When you're criming, don't wear a license plate. I think this is the central message of this. When you're criming, do not wear a license plate. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob is a former Ohio congressman and political analyst. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Right, and if you wear a license plate, you end up making license plates, right?
I
know.
I wasn't going to go there.
I am. I'll go there. My picture was high profile. I think this is a disturbing story, by the way. I can't understand. I don't know whether to blame the prosecutors or the courts. I'm not sure. The first one pleads guilty, gets a little tap on the hand, right?
Yep.
First, I can't remember who it was. And then they're going to, quote, send a message. Well, the government tried to send a message with a longer sentence, but, the judge didn't feel that way. Now, here you've got the gold medalist. He pleads guilty to the felony charge, of course, of obstructing the election. And in as they say, a surprise move, he plans to cooperate with the Justice Department. What is so shocking about that? now that he's caught, he plans to
Yeah.
cooperate with them. So what happens? Oh, yeah, I saw him here at the rally. I saw her at the rally. It's all on film. They don't need him to cooperate. They need to say, hey, thanks for your offer, and we're going to ask for 4 years for you. That's what they need to do. In fact, a high-profile guy like him set the bar. Give the example. That's just my feeling.
No, I'm right there with you.
I'm thinking that this is all starting to be blown by, the prosecutors, who I guess have to react to a court that seems, I don't know, sympathetic to those who, I've seen people sell pot and do a longer sentence.
There was the guy, in Philadelphia, got caught stealing 3 peppermint patties.
There you
spent
go.
500 days waiting for trial. And then he got some just obscene.
Well, he had bad taste, peppermint patties,
Yeah,
so they had to
that's
go
what
after
it was.
him for longer. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Not
It
with
really
ya.
is. Now this guy, the gold medalist is going to cooperate. What do they need him for? They ought to just, say, fine, we're going to double your sentence. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
It's starting to become very irritating.
because we're in this position now where people are now saying, no, we can't go after the gold medalist. He was just a tourist that day. He did nothing wrong. He was just walking in the park. It was a patriotic day. It wasn't an insurrection, Bob.
Yeah, I know, selfies on their
It's
own
crazy,
score.
crazy. Speaking of crazy, what is going on with your buddy Corey Lewandowski?
I just have read the stories. I don't have any personal inside information, but I will tell you, I mean, when this story broke today, and Corey had worked for me in 1990, it was 1998. He worked through 2 election cycles and then went on to work for, do you remember Bob Smith, who ran, I think he ran he was a senator.
I do.
I don't know what he ran for, but Corey went over to work for him, then ended up working for a couple of, I don't know, lobby groups or something, and then he ended up with Donald Trump coming down the escalator. So, and then, of course, he was fired by Donald Trump, and then Trump hired Paul Manafort, which made it worse for him. But anyway, I read this story today, and the thing that's stuck out at me, and again, I don't know what he did or didn't do, and he doesn't call me, but the thing that jumped out at me is that this is it seems like a pretty legitimate couple that are Trump supporters, big-time Trump supporters, and they have 4 witnesses to back it up, and the donor is Trishelle Odom, and she went public with this about what she says he did, and then of course this is the follow-up that tells you something here, because they have now removed him as chairman of the Make America Great Action Political Committee. Now here's the thing, though. I noticed in the article, Rick, and it was Trump's director of communications, Taylor Budowich, who announced on Twitter not long, maybe a couple hours ago, I think, that former Attorney General Pam Bondi will be replacing Lewandowski as head of the Mega Action PAC. Because this is the PAC. This is the big money deal.
Yeah.
So he's being accused by one of the, I don't know if they're going to take it to a court action or something, or police, but he's being accused by one of the big donors, and he's running the donor PAC, so therefore it's not a good deal.
You don't
obviously.
screw with the money.
Right. And so, but here's what they said, that Corey Lewandowski will be going on to other endeavors, and we want to thank him. He will no longer be associated with Trump World. That means all of it. You see, last time when he was fired because of Trump's daughter, and he was fired, but he still, would go in the White House, right on Air Force One. It was kind of the wink and nod fire.
Right.
This is kind of the I'm going to fire you and close my eyes fire.
Yeah, because only one person gets to grab her by the you-know-what, and that's the Donald.
That's true. Yeah, and get away with it. So I think that, this will lead to obviously other problems.
Well, also there's some rumor, and I don't know if it's true or not. I just happened to read it when I looked him up, and that evidently he's been possibly shacking up with the governor of South Dakota.
Oh, I didn't know that one. you're ahead of the spicy stuff, and he used to work for me years ago, so I didn't know that.
Yeah, because when I saw one, I Googled it because I'm talking to Bob. I got to bring this up to Bob. Maybe Bob knows if he's a philanderer, who knows what. And I figured, well, crazy.
That is, well, when I read the story and it came out that it was a Trump donor today, and it came public, I thought, okay, this isn't good. And then, of course, now that they've said he's not part of Trump world, that's pretty comprehensive. That's all of it.
Yeah. But on the Kristi Noem thing, the conservative website American Greatness reported today that multiple anonymous sources had informed writer Pedro Gonzalez that Noem is having a month-long relationship with Lewandowski.
How does he have time to do the mega?
I don't know, man.
What? You know?
Maybe give him credit for finding more hours in the day than the rest of us have.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I see that. So yes, she's calling it a lie. I didn't. That's the first I've seen that story.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna have to read through it.
Now the weird thing is, why would you hit on the donor's wife? I mean, that's the guy who could crush you. It is what it is.
It's the guy that did crushing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is saying that if they would have said, "Oh, we're shifting his duties to this," but they said, "Good luck, he's not in Trump world," then that ends it.
Yeah, well, let's get to the fun stuff today. Evidently, the three generals got grilled in the House, and I watched most of it, and I got to be honest, I'm tired of the, you get your 5 minutes to get your tweet in, or you get your viral moment, or whatever's going to get you invited on the cable news tonight. But there was no real thought that went into. At least I didn't see it. Well, what went wrong? How do we solve this problem? It just seemed like it was all a bunch of grandstanding, and I got to tell you, I'm tired of it.
Well, just for the listeners to know, I many times, like other members, have been part of the private, briefing, which is what happened with these generals and the committee, and then there's the public, right? And you can always bet Abu Ghraib stands out in my mind the best, Rick. We went in, we had this briefing on Abu Ghraib, we were shown this, really disgusting video, and people were like, and then we went out for the hearing, and it turned different directions. It became more theatric, it became more speech-giving in your 5 minutes. Everybody gets 5 minutes,
Right.
It became more dog and pony speech show. And I think with the generals, there's a couple of points here where the generals, said an option they had was to keep 2,500 of the troops there, et cetera. And again, options. So I'm sure that the generals laid out several paths, that could be taken. I think the press secretary of the president said it correctly, that, president appreciates the advice he gets, and then finally doesn't necessarily always agree with people. He wants candor, but he'll make his own decision. Now, there's no question also that it was a fairly rocky exit from Afghanistan. But I think they probably make a good point, and it can be applied to Donald Trump and Joe Biden, Rick, which is
that was my point.
Yeah, which is this. Also, there's a second one too. Setting these time frames. Donald Trump May 15th and President Biden August 31st, setting these time frames, and military people don't like him, so they spoke up on that. But beyond that, this was a 20-year hearing. This is where a lot of questions over the last four White Houses, the last four presidents to serve under those Congresses. There was a lot of 20 years here, and so I agree with you. I just didn't see it as this is it, wow, defining moment.
Yeah.
It's a mess for 20 years. It is a mess.
And look, I'm not giving Biden a pass. There were some mistakes, but given the reality of the moment, I don't think it was as bad as it could have been. And I didn't hear that from anyone. I think it was a Herculean leap to get as many people out as they did, as quickly as they did. And personally, look, I'm not a military person. I'm not the decider guy. But given the option of we're going to leave 2,500 people there, even though we said we're getting out, puts those 2,500 people at risk, and grave risk. And then if the government does collapse, I think it was McKenzie who said, well, that 2,500 number would then have to go to 5,000, which then takes me to what Biden was saying. His two options were simple: get out or escalate. That's how he saw it. There was no middle ground.
Well, that is the reality. To suggest that, first of all, to suggest that 2,500 American troops would have stopped the government from falling is ludicrous. Obviously, the generals still haven't read the intel reports correctly. The intel is bad. It was bad. No one knew in 12 days the country would fall. So that wasn't an option to leave 2,500 people. Two presidents set deadline times. Again, Trump and Biden. Looking back on history here, it would probably have been better if we didn't set deadline times. Trump started it, Biden bought into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're both the same. I'm not giving a pass to one or the other, but it would have been better had we just started to begin a process of doing what we wanted to do, which was to slowly clear out of the country, but we didn't do that. So, fate dealt a deck of cards that you deal with, and, most of the people got out. I know it wasn't 100%, and they're still working on things, but they, and also they were dealing with the State Department that was not approving people way back in January. They wouldn't approve people, the embassies, to be vetted and to be screened through in the proper way. So there was a series of that. But I think the missing pieces because of speeches, was to really dig into 20 years. If they wanted to dig in, to find out what mistakes we made. Of course, I'll call that a little useless, Rick, because we sure didn't care about the mistake going into Iraq to rectify that mistake, did we?
Nope.
To find out why our intel lied to us or did whatever they did. So, I think the hearings come and it's went.
But they got their moment. There were a couple people like Matt Gaetz and the rest of them who, you got to, General Milley, you've got to resign. Or I guess over this Chinese phone call. And look, when this came out, when the Woodward and Costa book came out, my first thought was, I guarantee Milley didn't do anything out of his chain of command because he's a military guy. They follow orders. That's what they do. And what we found out is, at least what I'm hearing, is that all along he's telling people that this is going on, that he didn't do what was originally reported and run rogue over telling the Chinese that we'll tell you if I'm going to bomb you or not.
Right. And what Milley is publicly saying is that Trump officials knew of the Chinese calls. And he names them. So they knew about the calls. They might have actually been part of saying, yes, it's okay, go call to keep things calmed down. So yes, he came out and said that they knew about the calls.
Now, the only thing that I would go after him over is, why is he talking to Woodward and Costa?
Well, I know they all do. It's just right, exactly. Why would you gain? Sometimes people think that, well, quote, their side of the story will get out there. It doesn't. It
Crazy.
Gets out there in the way that the writers want them to hear about it.
Yeah, nothing ever goes right that way.
Nothing.
Lastly, I wanted to get your thoughts on, is there going to be a vote tomorrow on the infrastructure?
I think so. I think that I know that there's some grumblings. If it's not tomorrow, it will be this week. It can't go beyond this week. So the reason I'm not saying for certain it'll be tomorrow is because you never know if a couple of wrinkles come up. But the speaker's holding pretty adamant. I know she's getting, some political threats from some of the progressives. We're going to bring the bill down, but I think there are some Republican votes through Fred Upton of Michigan, and plus a couple of the centrists have said, well, we're going to vote for the $3.5 trillion, which I again argue somebody needs to sit Senator Manchin down and find out what number he likes, so they can kind of solve that. But there's going to be an infrastructure bill passed. The speaker is smart enough to know she needs to get that moving. And that doesn't mean the centrists are going to go against her after she does it. In fact, she basically kind of said to everybody here, she didn't say quit threatening, but what she said was, to basically keep your powder dry and try to have a little team spirit here.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'll real quick go back to, the days I was in Congress where within the Democrat and Republican parties, you would have factions. But in the end, those factions on the Democratic side or Republican side tended to find some space together, then take your best shot to defend what you did or gripe against it, know. But these people jumping forward to the speaker to say, well, I'm not going to vote for this if you do that. And then the other side says, well, I'm not going to vote for this if you do that. I think she's smart enough to maneuver that bill through the landmines. Then they'll have to address the rest. And again, it's frankly not a House problem. It's Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema.
Yeah, and I think it's more Sinema than it's Manchin. Because I think Manchin, I think Manchin wants to vote for something. You're not going to get $3.5 trillion, as we've discussed. But something, I think Sinema's, I don't know, man. There's something there.
Well, you know what she's done, too? I mean, I don't have any proof of this, but I said this 3 weeks ago. They're laying back. They're letting Manchin be the face of this, hoping, well, he'll do some deal, when in all reality, I think she's been laying back because she doesn't want to do anything. And I think you're right. I think he will come up with a number. I'm not so sure she wants to.
Which is just crazy.
So we'll see. I mean,
we will see.
Be a lot of pressure.
I'm like I said, I hope we get something. I'm still fearful we get nothing.
Right.
And we'll see how that plays out. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Good stuff, our good friend Bob Ney. Look, as I said, I don't know what it is either of them really want. Is it no bill? Is it a $1 trillion Build Back Better bill? We got to get something. Something has to happen to move forward, because ultimately that's investment in the country. That's going to help us get back. It's going to help us get back on our feet and moving in the right direction. And finally, this just, I happened to watch some cable news today, and this was all over the place, and I don't know why, but evidently. Britney Spears is no longer under the conservatorship of her father, which, she's like, how old? Evidently she's been under his thumb all this time. He controls all the money. They have another person also who was doing some of this. They were in court today with some really just bizarre allegations. The father spying on them. We heard the testimony, a while ago about how they forced her to get an IUD. They blocked her from getting married. They whole bunch of things. Put her on lithium because she was being difficult while during rehearsals for some concert. Just all kinds of insanity. And I'm going, I don't quite know why. I know she had some mental health issues years ago. But isn't this one of those things where you just kind of go, this woman's worth millions of dollars. I think she can, I don't know, maybe better than most people be able to get out from under the thumb of her father there. Yeah, but here's the part that's really kind of crazy. The video footage of the people outside the courthouse, you would have thought that this was a massive trial with national security implications. There were literally 1,000 people there. And I'm going, are we that into Britney Spears? I mean, is this that big of a deal? Now, I would argue maybe we have some problems with dealing with people with mental illness. Maybe we have some problems because evidently this goes back to 2008. Evidently she was hospitalized for an evaluation. No details that they've put out. But I'm going, that's 13 years of someone basically controlling this woman at every turn. And wow, crazy. But evidently she's out from under the father, and not sure if the conservator that they had will continue forward. But we'll see. Now maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz will have another rally that they can go to get a little bit of attention. Because like I said earlier, they sure were, or Gaetz was sure ridiculous today during the Milley hearing. and the Austin and Mackenzie hearings. Man, we're so screwed. when the Britney Spears thing got more attention, I'm sometimes at a loss for words at what passes for media. Oh, and the other good thing today, Kamala Harris has a bust of Thurgood Marshall in her office. That was actually a story. That just sad. Just sad. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you check us out on social media. Follow us on Twitter at Rick Smith Show. Like us over at Facebook. You subscribe at YouTube, all of that stuff. Make sure you tune in Saturdays, WBAI New York City. We do our annual call-in show. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to